Uh, Amazing. Mars will kick it to you 2 minutes early.
Beautiful. Thanks so much. Hi, everyone. So thank you so much for coming, and a huge thank you to Brown Girls Doc Mafia and Pola and Chandler. I love this community so much, and this fellowship has meant so much to me. And I'm very excited and overwhelmed by everyone who's taking the time to join today. So I'll start off. Sorry, I'm also reading from my phone, so that's what's going on. Um, Okay, I'll start off by just introducing myself, doing some table setting, and then we can get started. So just some background on myself and how I got into documentary filmmaking. I was born and raised in Los Angeles, California, which is occupied Tongva and Chumash land. Um, and now I live in Brooklyn, New York, which is occupied Lenape land. Um, I'm the child of two television screenwriters who are also leaders in the Writers Guild of America. And so from a young age, I was really interested in both storytelling and then also collective organizing, particularly from the perspective of labor rights. Um, so I went to Brown University for undergrad and studied film theory there. And then I graduated in 2019 and went to Sundance Institute and worked there as an assistant. And that was kind of where I got a crash course in independent filmmaking. And then while I was working there in the summer of 2020, I actually started developing this film. We'll explain more on that later. um, so just some background on what motivates me as an artist. Kind of like the connective factor in all of my work is a drive towards collective liberation.
Mhm.
Um, so I see filmmaking as a means to both document and honor contemporary and historical efforts to achieve freedom, and also as a means to imagine, more liberated futures. I guess with this in mind, I would be remiss not to acknowledge the violence that's currently occurring in Palestine and to uplift my own, and I hope everyone's ongoing commitment to fighting with all that we have for a free Palestine. Um, I encourage everyone who identifies as a film worker to sign the Film Workers for Palestine Statement of Solidarity. I think Chandler can drop that in the chat for those who need the link. If you'd like to be more actively involved with that organization as an organizer, we'll also drop a link for a form you can use to sign up and join as an active organizer. Amazing, so that's in the chat as well. Um, and then obviously, because it's such an incredibly heavy time, I want to ground us in one of my favorite quotes, which is from Miriam Kaba. The quote is, "Let this radicalize you rather than lead you to despair." Um, so my overall goal for this masterclass is there's a lot to cover. So I kind of want to walk through the different stage of the filmmaking process as it relates to union. Um, and what I'll do is I'll give a really brief overview of what we did for this project, and then I'll kind of highlight main resources and tips and lessons that I learned along the way. Um, a really big caveat is obviously this is the first feature that I've ever produced, and so by no means do I consider myself an expert in any way. And in fact, most of the tips that I'll be highlighting and sharing come from a place of things I wish I had done differently or mistakes that I made. Um, and yeah, so I'll spend about 30 minutes doing that, and then I want to save 20 minutes at the end for Q&A because I think honestly, the best way we can use this time is I just want to hear what your guys' questions are, and we can go from there. Um, I'm kind of I'm pretty unprofessional, honestly, so you can ask me anything and I will probably answer it. And if not on this call, then I'll maybe find you somewhere else. Um, Okay, I think that's all the setup and caveats that I wanted to explain. And so to get started, I'll just explain, what union is for those who don't know. So this is a feature documentary about the Amazon Labor Union. This is a group of Amazon workers in Staten Island, New York, who became the first in the United States to successfully unionize their Amazon warehouse. Um, Amazingly, they did this without the backing of an established union, and their entire campaign was funded by a GoFundMe, where in total they raised $120,000. So that's up against a corporation that's worth obviously billions and billions of dollars. Um, for an entire year, night and day, rain and shine, these workers set up a humble little tent across the street from the warehouse and worked to build a sense of care and community amongst their coworkers. And that's really what paved the way to this extraordinary and unexpected victory. So with that, we have a short clip that we're going to play, and then I'll get into my presentation. So let's roll clip.
Can everyone see? Good. Okay.
Chandler, I don't think the audio is coming through.
Okay, audio wasn't coming through.
Not for me. I think maybe because you were muted. You could run it back.
Okay.
Thank you.
Of course. Thank you.
We're all Amazon workers. We're trying to form a union that's specifically for Amazon workers, which is why we're trying something completely new here that gives us the legal right to bargain all of our wages and working conditions as a group instead of as individuals. The way it works now is if you want a job here at Amazon, you have to sign whatever the fuck and agree to it.
Hey, I don't want to bother you. I'm sorry. I see you eating your Mac, but we have hot dogs, hamburgers. We got some baked ziti. We got some real food over there. So let's have a walk. Let's get some real food. You know. Hey, hey, you know that's illegal, right? You know that's illegal, right? You're not supposed to be doing that. I'm talking to you. You know that's illegal, right? Don't do that.
Okay. Pausing because it seems like audio still not coming through.
Yeah, I think it may be the sharing, like just playing the audio through the
Okay.
call. But we can just jump into the presentation, I think.
You sure? We can try one more time. It is so beautiful. If timing allows. Let me know.
Yeah, Chandler, are you playing with the sharing audio option?
Yes, I'm gonna try one more time. Thank you also everyone for the Zoom tech continues to always be teching. Try it. Let me know how this is.
We're all Amazon workers. We're trying to form a union that's specifically for Amazon workers, which is why we're trying something completely new here that gives us the legal right to bargain all of our wages and working conditions as a group instead of as individuals. The way it works now is if you want a job here at Amazon, you have to sign whatever the fuck and agree to whatever. Hey, I don't want to bother you. I'm sorry. I see you eating your Mac, but we have hot dogs, hamburgers. We got some baked ziti. We got some real food over there. So okay. let's have a walk. Let's get some real food. You know.
Hey, you know that's illegal, right? You know that's illegal, right? You're not supposed to be doing that. I'm talking to you. You know that's illegal, right? Don't do that. Happy birthday to you.
Jay, get this hand load up. No, just load up.
Make a wish.
Happy birthday.
Thank you guys. This is so special.
The transit Google. Y'all know what it is.
Last year I was in there going to hell. This year I'm here chilling.
Great, thank you, Chandler. I'm glad the sound worked out because I was like, the score is quite beautiful, so I want people to be able to hear it. And I guess I chose that clip just because, again, with this kind of motivation and just like documenting efforts for collective liberation, that sequence really felt to me indicative of just this small group of people creating their own freedom, this kind of like small moment of freedom where they're just having a barbecue, they're greeting people on their way to work. They have this birthday party across the street from the Amazon warehouse. And yeah, I'm just really motivated by like kind of those small moments of freedom and liberation that we can create for ourselves. Beautiful. Okay, so let me screen share and we can jump into the presentation. Cool. Okay, producing your first feature. This is me. Here we go. Okay, so starting with development. So way back in 2020, Chris Smalls, who's one of the protagonists of the film, led a walkout at the JFK warehouse in Staten Island in March of 2020. As I'm sure everyone remembers, this is a time that was really terrifying. No one knew what was going on in the initial stage of the pandemic. And for Amazon workers, they fell into the category of essential worker. And so they were required to go to work. And they were seeing PPE and masks and all of these things being processed down the conveyor belts and simultaneously did not have access to those forms of protection themselves. So Chris and a few of his colleagues led this walkout. Within 2 hours, Chris was fired. And then a few days later, there was a memo that was leaked from kind of an Amazon executive C-suite meeting in which they referred to Chris as not smart or articulate. So at the time, this was like a bit of a news story. And I remember hearing about this and just being, really disturbed by the situation, but then also really amazed and inspired by what Chris and his colleagues had done. And I was also really, again, just kind of like moved and interested by this moment in which pretty much all of us were reorienting our understanding of how we related to our workplaces. For people who had never had to reckon with these things before, it may have been the first time in which you realized my boss does not care about me, the government does not care about me, like these things will not protect me. We really only have each other. And so, yeah, I was just really interested in developing a project that kind of responded to that moment and to that shift in how many of us were relating to work. And I was also interested in Amazon in particular, kind of as this, as demonstrative of this much larger existential threat that is racialized, surveillance capitalism. So basically just being really moved by what Chris did. My friend and I like DM'd him on Instagram and just kind of, introduced ourselves, said, would you be interested in ever having being a part of a documentary film? He was, and he had actually already been contacted by a different producer named Samantha Curley. He put us in touch. We all started working together. Samantha's the absolute best. And so then kind of like the development process started from there in earnest. So that was like midsummer 2020. We spent about, this is Chris. We spent about 6 months researching Amazon, kind of like generating potential ideas for the film and considering, directors who might be a good fit for the project, right? So one of the directors we reached out to was Brett Story. I had been a fan of her work, and she had actually done a short film called Camper Force, which is the same subject as the film Nomadland. So we reached out. She was interested in the project. Time goes by. At a certain point, Chris and his coworkers decided they wanted to hold a union campaign at the JFK warehouse that he was fired from. And at that point, that felt like, okay, this is a really kind of tangible thing that we can structure a documentary about. We had really luckily gotten this development grant from the IDA, and so we had a bit of funding to actually begin shooting. And so by spring of 2021, which was a year after his initial walkout, we actually began the production process. So a few other things just on development for this project. Once Brett joined the team, she also invited a lot of our other core creative collaborators, including Martin DeCicco, who's the cinematographer of the film and just did an extraordinary job creating the visual language of the film and building a lot of the relationships and doing a lot of work in the field, just really incredible work. Of course, she invited Steve Mang, who joined as a co-director and was also a cinematographer on the ground. And also Blair McClendon, who is one of the editors of the film. And everyone is just a rock star. Like, I'll keep saying that. We just had a really amazing team of incredible artists and, just kind of like politically motivated people. So we were really lucky in that respect. And then I think also something, to point out about the development stage of this project was that it's sort of unconventional in that, it started with a group of producers who then brought a director on board rather than the other way around. So in some ways, I think that set this up as a very like collaborative team dynamic. It was not an auteur-driven film. And also something else to point out is that it was not necessarily going to be like a pure verite film from the jump. We were exploring, filming with other groups or kind of having like vignettes that looked at Amazon more systematically. We weren't really sure of the vision from the beginning, which is amazingly how many documentaries work. Okay, so first set of hot tips. When you're building your core team, really consider communication styles, work styles, and personal values. The main thing here is like, don't take that for granted and think, oh, because we're all passionate about this project, those things will work out. Really consider all of those elements, because if you don't create a foundation from the jump that, responds to communication styles and differences in work styles, you will run into many problems later. So do not take that for granted. Spend a lot of time building that up front. Okay, once you have the core creative team, establishing a set of common goals and shared values and being very specific about these. This is kind of, most of the hot tips here are just creating a foundation of trust and of proactively preparing for conflict, because with any group dynamic, with any film project, there will be conflict, there will be disagreement. And if you have a foundation of trust and of shared values that you can return to and point to when you get into those disagreements, that's just going to be, very important. You don't want to be reacting to conflicts when they come up. You want to have kind of like a foundational understanding. Why are we making this film together? What are we setting out to do? So if things come up, you can, return to those. And then this is a more tangible one. I think a great place to get started is just with the nonfiction core application. It's, I think a good thing to do, just if you're like a producer starting out, is to break that out into the narrative section, the like production process section, and the financial section. Um, I would recommend just having like a meeting or a long discussion with the core creative team about each of those different things. And I mean, there's so much to get into there. But yeah, basically making sure that you have conversations with your team up front about each of those categories, and then you can hear what everyone thinks, talk, through all of that material, and then you can go off and actually write the treatment, or whoever does that, and then that is what you will use to apply for every grant under the sun. I have, so there are a lot of resources for building out those different elements, and then for a lot of the material or a lot of the processes that you want to have in place before you begin shooting. I'll have Chandler drop, there's gonna be like 10 links, but I found all the things that I used when I was doing this process, and collected like the resources that were the most helpful for me. I wish we could get into each of these things in more depth, but I'm just gonna throw out those resources, and they're very helpful. Okay, so let's see. Yeah, basically it's like before you even begin shooting, you have to make sure that safety and security plans, your legal infrastructure, your communication systems, and media management is all ready to go. If you begin shooting without any one of these in place, again, that's a bit of a recipe for a mess on your hands. And I think one of the biggest lessons that I learned just in setting up all these different systems is, you have to find something that works for your whole team, but you also have to find workable compromises, and you have to trust your instincts as a producer. And what I mean by that is, don't create situations in which everyone, like the system is responding to everyone's needs, because that will often mean that it's really inefficient. Instead, you should try to find a compromise that works like enough for everyone. And at the end of the day, it's just an efficient and streamlined way of doing things. You don't want to, I guess the lesson here is just like, you can actually over accommodate. I don't know if someone's off mute. You can over accommodate, and that actually will not serve you. If people have questions on that, I can get more into that maybe in the Q&A, because it's kind of a tough line to walk as a producer. Okay, production. So we started shooting in the spring, like I said, in the spring of 2021, when they actually began the union campaign. We filmed the entire campaign from start to finish, which was really amazing. And when we started filming with the Amazon Labor Union, it became clear at that point that it was really, like, we didn't need other elements to the film, that it really would just be pure verite of this union campaign. And so that was just a really interesting kind of like exploratory process to figure that out, that would be, like the full scope of the film. As far as fundraising, we were really, really lucky. Like I said, we got that initial grant from the IDA, and then we had an executive producer come in very early on, and that funding covered this initial stage of production. So there was never a time in which we had to pause for fundraising. We were able to just keep shooting, which is like a unicorn situation, truly. Once we were in production, we were really successful with grant fundraising, and we participated in several pitch markets. And so the project was kind of on the radar of industry for a few years. And then by the time that the ALU won the election in the spring of 2022, we began working with Impact Partners, which is an equity financier, and they closed our budget gap. So we didn't stop shooting actually until well into 2023. And we filmed, this is kind of a fun fact, we filmed 2 whole other union campaigns that did not make their way into the film. And we, in the end, I think we had over 200 shoot days and 600 hours of footage. So there was just a ton of verite production. This is one of our protagonists, Natalie. I'll just run through these. Okay, production is nothing without media management. I think that's pretty straightforward. Constantly revise and strengthen pitch materials. 2 hot tips within this one. When you're making a deck, I would recommend making it easy for you to edit the deck constantly, meaning whatever your graphic designer does or whoever makes it, make sure that you have access to those files and you can kind of edit it continually. You don't want to be in a situation in which you just have a PDF and there's like one word that you want to change and you are stuck. So you want to make that like easily editable for yourself because you're going to be constantly tweaking it. And then the other hot tip is constantly be looking for good stills and keep track of the raw files that those film stills are from. Again, there will be so many times where you need to provide a still for something and you don't want to send like a shitty screenshot. You should send the real thing. So, you know, keep that up to date or keep track of that. Okay. Establish consistent team and participant check-ins, project related or not. What I mean by that is both obviously related to the project, but then also just to like bond and have fun. That is so, so important to just have times in which you're just there to have fun. Continually update and reset expectations. I think that there's sometimes a feeling in the documentary industry of when something changes, a sense of guilt when something changes or when you have to reset expectations around something. You never have to feel guilty. Like that's just what happens. Things will change. Life happens, you know, all kinds of changes can occur. And you just have to be transparent and communicative that, you know, and just like, honestly, from the beginning, set the expectations that you will be needing to reset expectations, that the project will not stay the same from start to finish. And so just having those check-ins where you can like make that clear is really important. And then the last hot tip here is tapping into community, both inside and outside of the documentary world. This work is just really hard. There's going to be a lot of things where it's not, you'll want an outside opinion. And so you want to have both filmmakers who you feel close with, kind of like workshopping questions or issues with, and then also people that aren't in the documentary world who you can, again, if you have an issue or a question, just like ask your friend and they might have like a way better perspective on things than someone who makes documentaries. They might just be like, that's fucking weird. Like, don't do that. You know, like, like they might have a really useful perspective. Okay. Also, y'all, thank you, because I know I'm throwing so much information at everyone, but I'm excited to get to the Q&A and we can like dig into what's, you know, actually landing or not. Okay, final part, post-production and then the festival premiere. So by 2023, right, we'd been shooting for 2 years. They had won their union election. We were following those union campaigns I mentioned that were unsuccessful, and those actually are not in the film, but we're still filming a bit, right? But at this point, we're mostly like 80–90% in the edit, and then, you know, some production is still going on. One thing that I was really happy about is Blair, our amazing editor, had been part of the project from the beginning. And so he obviously wasn't in like production meetings, but he was a part of creative conversations from the project's genesis. And I would really recommend that, of just like, if you can, involving an editor as soon as possible and have them watch footage, because you'll run into situations where the production team is so jazzed about something, you're feeling really confident about something, and your editor will say like, y'all, that is not in the footage. Whatever you're talking about, you have romanticized, or, you know, like it's just like actually not, it's not coming across, you know. So it's helpful to have that kind of reciprocal relationship between production and post. Okay, so our goal was to finish the film by the end of 2024, or sorry, by the end of 2023, and to premiere at Sundance. So in order to stay on track and meet that goal, we started working with Malika Zuhali Waral, another editor who, again, is a superstar, amazing. We started working with her kind of in late summer 2023, and then we also moved into a physical edit suite. And so we were just really, before that, we had been editing remotely. So basically by the end of summer 2023, we were just like full grind in the edit. In October, we learned, we applied to Sundance. In October, we learned that we got into Sundance, and then we did like the classical Sundance mad dash to finish post. I do not recommend doing that. So fall of 2023, once we got in, was just dedicated to finishing the edit, moving through sound, music, color, graphics, credits, et cetera, et cetera. We just worked with a really extraordinary team, and everyone was quite passionate about the film. And so we made it work in a lot of ways, but it was a pretty intense finishing process. Okay, so hot tips for post-production. Like I said, involving an editor as soon as possible is really amazing. It's not always possible, but if you can have that reciprocal relationship between production and post, I think it can be quite helpful. Let obstacles be creative gifts. You're gonna run into all kinds of obstacles with running out of budget, having timelines you have to meet, and I think something you can do as a producer is, rather than presenting those as stress points, kind of try to turn them into creative gifts, into parameters that the team can use, rather than just kind of having like aimless, unrestricted time or space. It's sort of like, okay, we have to, like, this is what we have. How do we make the strongest decision? How do we hone in on whatever it is? Frame obstacles as creative gifts. Okay, in instances of disagreement in the edit process, return to the work. What do I mean by this? Oftentimes, when you're getting into editorial conversations, things can get really abstract, and it becomes really difficult to communicate and to disagree and agree when people are kind of just in, I don't know, like more talking about politics or theories or things like that. And so as much as you can encourage everyone on the team to talk really specifically what's happening in the footage, this strong feeling that you're having, point to the thing in the footage, to the sound element, to whatever it is, point to something tangible, and we can all return to that as a team, and work through that. This is also a great moment, right, when you're getting into disagreements, is to refer to those shared goals and values that were the foundation of the project. And you can remind everyone, hey, this is heated, this is tense, but reminder, we're all here for the same reason. We're all setting out to achieve these goals. Let's ground ourselves in that. And then this is kind of an obvious one, maintain momentum. During production, you might have wiggle room for things, but when you're on a post, like, things just feel so, lots of deadlines and whatnot with a post schedule. And so you'll just want to have backup plans, and then backup plans for the backup plans in case your AE drops out, in case that, really thinking through all kinds of backup plans for post. I cannot recommend that enough. Okay. So last thing, and then we can jump into the Q&A, just to put a button on where we are with the project itself. So we premiered at the start of this year at Sundance in the US documentary competition. We started working with Submarine as a sales agent and with Cinetic for publicity. And since Sundance, we've been screening the film at various film festivals. And we've also been developing a really exciting impact campaign that's specifically designed to use the film as a union organizing tool, most specifically for Amazon workers, but kind of generally. I'm very jazzed about that. And then we're still, searching for wider distribution, and kind of, I think everyone can relate to the extremely unfriendly nonfiction market that, we're all struggling through. So we're still in that zone, and in some way, anything could happen, but in some ways our team is considering a more DIY kind of non-traditional distribution route. So those are kind of plans right now. So that brings us up to this very moment. And again, thank you for receiving this overwhelming amount of information. I hope some of the hot tips were helpful, and very excited to hear what questions people may have. So I'll get out of the screen share, and then Paula, if you want to throw questions my way.
Yes. Thank you so much, Mars, for all of that. We can get right into it. Thanks all for submitting questions throughout. Some of these came in a bit early for things that you may have gotten to at later points in your presentation. And for those, if you could offer more context or elaborate, that would be great. So the first question that I wanted to raise, how did all of you distribute responsibilities within the producer group? Was everyone responsible for fundraising or festivals?
That's a great question. So myself and Samantha Curley were the two like producers as far as that was kind of like our overall role. And then Brett and Steven, the directors, and Martin, the cinematographer, also got producing credits, and kind of the five of us were like the producing team. So between myself and Samantha, Sam is based in LA, I'm based in New York, and so that kind of split up responsibilities in a pretty organic way, where I was doing a lot of like on the ground field producing, a lot of like connecting with participants directly, coordinating shoots. I was the post supervisor. So those are my roles. And then Sam was doing line producing and a lot of liaising with funders and kind of just things that that don't necessarily need to be done in person. So our producer responsibilities fell along those lines of like in person, not in person work. Sam was also like the budget wizard. And then I kind of took the lead on applying to grants and developing a lot of our pitch materials. So we had really defined roles, which was helpful in that we just always knew who was doing what. And we had a weekly producer meeting, which was like a god, like we needed that. And then for the larger team, so for a lot of pitch calls, the directors would be on those and would be doing that kind of producing work from the perspective of directors. So Steve and Brett were really involved in pitching the film, of course. And then Martin and Steve, being cinematographers on the ground, were very involved with like field producing.
Amazing. The next question, and you spoke a little bit to this in the piece about focusing about the work, Mars, but this specifically asked, did you ever have to part ways with a creative team member because of difference in communication or work styles, or were you usually able to talk through disagreements?
That's a good question. Most of the time we were able to work through things. There were a few times where there was someone working on the project in a temporary sense. And so the fact that they were kind of working on it temporarily, that made things, it was like they were not part of kind of like the long-term team. And so when there were issues there, it was easier to part ways just because it was sort of like dictated by budget or timeline or things like that. So I would say overwhelmingly, yeah, we kind of made it through conflict and disagreement by referring to those like shared goals and just kind of like working through things in that way.
Yeah. Well, speaking to that also, the more, the different types of engagements in a temporal sense. We have a question. Did folks on the team maintain day jobs or other gigs throughout the process? And if so, do you have tips for maintaining momentum?
That is an excellent question. So let's see, a few team members had full-time jobs, most did not. I was a team member with a full-time job. So for most of the filmmaking process, I was working as an assistant at Sundance and then later at a production company. I worked as an executive assistant there. I don't have tips on this. I honestly just want to make this a call or like just kind of share my experience and maybe it'll be affirming. But it was not sustainable. Like it was honestly really, really challenging and not, it does like, it's a really unsustainable way of working in that usually what I would do is I would like 6 to 9 a.m. work on the film, go to my day job 9 to 5 or like 10 to 6, come home 6 to 9, work on the film again. That's no good. And that, or like I would work on weekends, things like that. So I don't know. I don't have a good response to how to do that well or make that sustainable, but I'll just say that that's what I did, and I wish there were more. I don't know. I don't recommend that. I hope we can find ways to move this industry in a much more like sustainable direction.
Absolutely. The candor is always necessary and appreciated of just the realness of that. Another cue, in regards to the safety of the union workers, what was your strategy? Do you have any resources you could signpost to? And is there anything you learned for future projects?
Yeah, so I will really shout out the Safety and Security Handbook and Checklist. This was one of the very first things we did just to set up like the digital security protocols, the onset production safety protocols, and we did a lot of work with our media lawyer as well as the Reporters Committee. What's their full name? The Reporters Committee for Free Press, I think. I'm forgetting their full name. Anyways, they're a pro bono legal clinic for reporters and journalists and are extraordinary. We did a lot of legal work up front to understand the security risks, safety risks, and also, things that fall outside of that, of just like how to not get in the way of organizing, where it's like it's not necessarily like a safety risk, but it's just like if you don't want to inhibit the thing that you're trying to make a film about, obviously. So yeah, so I would shout out that handbook. And again, before you even think about beginning to shoot, make sure you've done that checklist, and also that you've gotten a lot of consultation on whatever plans you create from very experienced people. Make sure that you have really good legal infrastructure. And I would say something, I don't know, something that I always think is important to reference for this project is because, obviously we had this like corporate kind of antagonist who was a central part of the film. We had to maintain really strict journalistic boundaries. And so there were, which is a big conversation in our field, right? Of just like how to have ethical relationships with participants, da da da. But for us, the most important thing we could do for safety and security was to maintain a journalistic boundary where there were not editorial or financial exchanges between our team and the participants of the film. As far as like what I would learn for future projects, I just think that's a challenging thing, because in a vacuum, I don't know if I agree with that. Like, I don't know if I basically, I wish that there could have been other ways that we could have done the film, but because of the legal risks, that was the best way to handle it. So it's tricky, right? And again, this is a situation where I think having a really strong filmmaking community where you can ask questions around that, as in addition to like lawyers and whoever. So yeah, shout out to the safety and security checklist. And then yeah, just get a lot of like consultation and talk to other filmmakers in the development stage.
Great. We had a couple of questions come into with reference to EPs. So how you go about finding or securing one, and then how did you connect with the executive producer who helped finance early production for this film? And if you think that you would have been able to start filming without this person's initial support?
Yeah, great questions. So for the initial executive producer, that was through a number of like personal connections. This was not someone who was a traditional film funder. And so again, just to be like candid, on this call with this community, that's extremely lucky. That's extremely lucky. That was just by virtue of, personal networks that we found that person. And it was, that unlocked our ability to just enter production that summer. And if we had not started filming that summer, who knows if even the film would have come together. Like we would have missed a whole major section of the film, right? So that was incredibly lucky. As far as later executive producers, like impact partners, that was more, we found those relationships by participating in different pitch markets. So we did Gotham Week in like 2021, and then we did the Hot Docs Pitch Forum and Dealmaker in 2022, I think. And I don't know, pitch markets are weird. Like all of this is weird, but a lot of the times you're just like having meetings and maybe nothing comes out of it in the moment, but you've established a relationship or gotten the project on people's radar in some ways. And then at a more, so probably you'll have a meeting and nothing will happen. But then at a strategic moment, for example, like when the ALU won the election, then you return to those contacts that you've built and, see if there's something there at that point. I think a constant thing that everyone, I'm sure so many people on this call are running into is like the chorus of meeting with executive producers, whoever, and they're like, oh, I love this project. This is amazing. Come back to us with a rough cut. Just like all this, like, come back to us later, come back to us later. So again, I would say we were very lucky.
General, my style is about.
Oh, did someone? Okay. I think we were very lucky just again in the timing of the project where when the ALU won the election, it was in the news. And so that really excited a lot of funders. And I think that helped our ability to bring on executive producers, at that stage of production.
Great. Okay, we have 1 minute left. So I'm trying to group the questions in terms of folks who are sort of asking the same things. We had a number of questions come in about pay. So Mars, you spoke a little bit about how you held down a full-time job while working on this. Some folks have questions about the considerations that were made for budgeting pay for different team members. So one question, how did you sustain yourself? You talked a little bit about that. Were you working on other or was that actively considered in the budgeting phase? And just generally how y'all determine pay for different team members.
Mm-hmm. So I will shout out DPA's, I didn't link to it because it's coming out right now, but the Documentary Producer Alliance, who are doing amazing work, are releasing, I think literally this week, contract guidelines, which I believe will include, like kind of standard rates or how to figure out rates for different collaborators and different considerations there. I would say most people, we figured out a lot of this, just people have kind of like their rate for indie films, or like people have their standard rate and then they might negotiate that a bit if it's an indie project. And, for us, it's a labor film. And so for myself and Sam, making sure that we could pay people equitably and sustainably was a major, major priority. And, again, it can be hard to do that with independent films. I think we were quite lucky with the consistency in which we were receiving funding. And so we're able to pay people their rates like throughout the project. But yeah, I guess to answer that question, there are a lot of resources that, where you can find kind of standard rates or how to calculate those. And I think a lot of people will just, be able to tell you what their rate is. So, so DPA contract guidelines this week, keep your eyes out.
Amazing. Okay, that brings us to only 1 minute over. Thanks all for your questions. I know we couldn't get to all of them. We had a lot of questions pouring in through the chat, but we'll do our best to make sure that everything is covered in the follow-up, the resources that were named alongside, any other responses that Mars is able to get to. One question I will speak to in the chat, where will the resource be located? We have a community resource folder on Mighty Networks, but we can also shoot an email to everyone who was in attendance, so you can make sure you have all of that. Thank you all so much for being here. A couple of things before we let y'all go. First of all, huge thank you to Mars for all of the knowledge and resources that you dropped on us. Love the framing, love the engagement also from the community with all of your amazing questions. There are questions that I'm sure will be helpful to everyone who watches this recording and everyone that was here. So thanks for being a part of that. We do want to take a photo before we all go. So if folks are willing to come on camera just for a quick little moment, see all your beautiful faces, that would be amazing. And then we will. launch a little poll to close us out. You don't have to, come on, if you're in a bathing suit.
Okay, I'm gonna take a photo on 3. 1, 2, 3. And I'll do one more. 1, 2, 3.
Thank you,
Beautiful.
Chandler. Okay, so if you have just 1 or 2 minutes, we have a poll that we launched just to give us a little bit of feedback about the class, sort of what you experienced today. Like I said, the master classes will be weekly, so we'll definitely incorporate any feedback that you have for us to future sessions. And one last note is that to keep up to date on the Film Union, there is a website that I think, thank you, Chandler, for dropping that link. Yeah, and again, thanks all for being here. I'm gonna definitely save this chat to, I may have I definitely thumbs up every question that I saw, but if I didn't thumbs up your question, I will be saving the chat. So I'll go through all of those and make sure we have them. And yeah, I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their Monday.
Thank you everyone for coming. Appreciate y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was really good. Bye.